and welcome to More Than Clothes with me, your host, Sarah Ryan. In this podcast, we'll explore the connection between style, identity, confidence, and mindset, and why getting dressed is never just about clothes. Today, I want to talk about one of the phrases that I hear most probably from women I work with. And, I really work with women over the age of 40 mostly. And it is one of the most common phrases I hear, and it is one of my most hated phrases. And that is mutton dressed as lamb. Have you ever felt that, when you're shopping, that thought crosses your mind, oh, I don't want to look like mutton dressed as lamb. That fear creeps in. You don't want to look like you're trying too hard or you're trying to look younger. Or maybe it's crossed your mind when you've seen somebody else dressing in a way. But I'm going to get into it today, and we need to address this because it is holding many women back from even trying to find their own style. So let's get into it. I want to just briefly explain what this phrase means because I know not everybody here is maybe a native English speaker and they may not have heard of this idiom that is used so frequently. So mutton refers to the meat of an older sheep. And of course, lamb is a younger sheep. So when mutton is dressed as lamb, it's an older sheep dressing as a younger sheep, trying to look younger. So that's essentially what it means. And I want to get into why there is such fear around this phrase, why it's weaponized and how we can manage it. And I'm going to give you tips along the way to help you navigate your style as well. If you are that person over 40 and that phrase has started to creep into your mind and you're worried that other people might be thinking they might be saying this about you. So essentially, this podcast today is about aging, it's about visibility, and it's about permission. The origin of this phrase dates back to around 1811. And it was first discovered in a private journal of a social gossip called Mrs. Frances Calvert, or Calvert maybe. So in a social context, this goes back to Georgian and Regency England, where there were very strict codes of conduct and rules of decorum that dictated how women should dress according to their age. So dressing outside your age bracket was considered extremely socially unacceptable. Now, in previous podcast episodes, I have discussed this idea of us evolving as human beings versus how quickly our brains evolve. And they're evolving at a much slower pace than how we're evolving socially. And this disconnect between our brain's growth and then our social growth, and there's a big gap there. And this is where this fear lies, because we have not disconnected from things that were going on in the early 1800s to what's going on today. We have to recognize that we have thankfully evolved and come a long way in terms of how we view women and, equality. We also have a long way to go in terms of how we view women and equality. And I mean, the list could go on. We could talk about developments in women's health and all sorts. But there's a little bit of letting go that we need to do and say to ourselves, no, we are not subscribing to the mindset that we had in the early 1800s. I mean, most of us, if we were plonked into the early 1800s, just dropped into it, I think we'd probably struggle a lot socially and, how we dress and everything. We'd stand out like a sore thumb. We're not supposed to be living according to those times, yet these phrases have stuck. They have endured and they have been weaponized and continue to control how we as women think, dress, and behave. Now, women have had to fight for a lot of things in that time, over 100 years. A lot has changed for women. And in one sentence, we regress to a point where we're back in the early 1800s. We're being controlled by what other people think and what they might comment on, how we dress. Are we really going to let ourselves be dictated to like that? Women have fought too hard to let a sentence like that control us. So let's just get our head around that much, that no, we are not going to be subjected to this misogynistic, honestly, way of thinking any longer. And on that note, it is a misogynistic term. Think about it. Can you name an equivalent phrase for men? Right? So mutton dressed as lamb refers to a woman dressing in a way that is supposedly too young for the age that she is. Is there an equivalent for men? No, there is not. For as long as I can tell, men aging has been celebrated. They get sexier with age. That silver fox, even the dad bod. We have celebrated the aging of men, and we have shamed the aging of women. So not only is this a sexist term, it's ageist as well. This reminds me of, if anybody saw the movie Barbie and that wonderful monologue that was delivered by America Ferrara, where she talks about this impossible line that women walk on a daily basis, that we should be attractive, but not too attractive that we threaten others. We should stay fashionable, but don't make it look like you're trying too hard. Wear makeup because otherwise it looks like you're not trying or you've given up on yourself, but don't wear too much makeup because men don't like too much makeup. It is this impossible narrative that women have had to navigate, and it keeps us in a place of uncertainty, which has worked for many people. In a man's world, keeping women in a place of uncertainty, of self-doubt, it worked for the patriarchy. And without turning this podcast into a feminist issue, this phrase, mutton dressed as lamb, is a feminist issue. I mean, imagine if all of us were 20% more confident in ourselves. What would we do differently? What opportunities would we fight for? Would we go for? What would we not tolerate from other people if we were that bit more self-assured, confident? I think the world would look like a very different place. I think it would be a better place. So keeping women in a place of ambiguity, of self-doubt, it basically means that you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. So why not go for it? Because no matter what you do, no matter what you wear, it feels like we're never going to quite get it right. And I think it's also up to each one of us as individuals, when we see another woman trying something new, stepping out of her comfort zone, that we should champion that. We should celebrate that and say, good on you. That's an inspiration. We need more women doing that. So that phrases like mutton dressed as lamb die, so that people cannot use it against us. In my time working with women over the last 15 years or so, the fear that they are experiencing comes from a place of they don't want to look ridiculous. There's a fear of being judged. There's a fear of maybe being laughed at, being seen as desperate, or being told that they're past it. None of this is something that any of us want to experience. So it's not actually the clothes that we're afraid of. It's this fear of social rejection. The fear is not, can I wear this? The fear is, what will people think if I do? And I would encourage you to go back to season 1, where I did a whole podcast on this topic of what will people think. I won't get too much into it today, but this is what it comes back to, coming back to this social fear of rejection. It's a valid fear, as I talk about in that previous episode, but it's also something that we can manage as well. So let's talk about ways that we can manage this fear of, what happens if someone thinks I'm mutton dressed as lamb. Style is not age specific. When you go into a shop, first of all, the shop sign does not have an age bracket on it. Maybe they try to target certain ages, and you can feel that sometimes through the type of music that they'll play in the background, how they merchandise their stock, how they dress their mannequins maybe. But this is something that is unspoken. It's unwritten. There's nowhere that says this shirt is for somebody between the ages of 15 to 20. Likewise, there's no dress out there that it has the age limit on it. Well, this dress is only for somebody who is of the age of 55 to 65. Style is not age specific. What I encourage my clients to think about when they're dressing is not to think about, dressing appropriately for my age. I hear that an awful lot as well. I want to, dress for my age. And I think that's admirable because, if you're trying to look younger, I think sometimes not willing to accept the age that you are perhaps can be part of the problem. But there's a lot of people out there who are absolutely fine with being 40 plus. But what they say is, I want to dress for my age. Now, the problem is you are only that age for that year. You're only 40 for that year. The next year you'll be 41. And what do you do with your wardrobe as you evolve? We've talked about this. You evolve as a person, your style has to evolve as a person. So what are you going to do? Reinvent your wardrobe every couple of years? No, that's not practical. A better way of thinking about your style is thinking, is this an ageless item? So if it really bothers you worrying about, is this too young for me? Ask yourself, is this an ageless item? Can I imagine somebody in their 30s wearing this? Can I imagine somebody wearing it in their 50s, in their 70s? Granted, you might style it differently, but if you can imagine that item on a person of different ages, you have found an ageless item. So I would encourage you to think not about dressing for your age, but consider your wardrobe or how you shop dressing for ageless items. I also want to encourage you or to remind you that style is self-expression specific. Your expression of yourself is not going to be understood by everybody. That's okay. Again, I've talked about this before. We're not dressing for other people. We're not dressing to please other people. Hopefully we're not. We're dressing in a way that is an expression of who we are. Now, if you are unclear about who you are or you're trying to mask it. I mean, I was working with a client there recently and she was afraid. She knew that she was a little offbeat, but she was afraid of expressing that because she didn't want to come off a little bit strange or different or, whatever way people might perceive her. But that was impacting her style. So if you are suppressing who you truly are, if you don't know who you truly are, your style is going to be complicated. It's going to be difficult to figure out because you do not have that anchor in place that says, okay, I know who I am. Everything else sprouts from there. My decision making, my values, the way I dress, the music choices I like. And that's why I work with people on identity first and then style. So if your sense of self is wishy-washy, well, then your clothes are going to be wishy-washy as well. When you are clear about who you are, you're confident in your style and the self-expression of that. And you will not allow phrases like mutton dressed as lamb to impact what you like and how you like to express yourself. So the question to be asking yourself is not, am I too old for this? The question should be, does this feel like me? And if you don't know who me is, that is a problem. That is something that we need to figure out. And that is what I work on with my clients before we get to the expression part of understanding colors, body shape, all of that kind of thing. So the real tragedy here, I suppose, it's not, trying to look younger than your age. If that's what you want to do, great. The real tragedy, I think, is it's actually abandoning yourself because of your age. I think when we come to a place of acceptance and again being certain of who we are at that stage in life and having certainty, having self-trust in that, allows you to express yourself in a way that is going to be unmoved by the thoughts of others. And that, I think, is a wonderful goal to have. I always imagine this kind of analogy where if you're a ship at sea and you're anchored down, the waves can be swirling around you, the current can be moving and thrashing about. But if you are anchored in who you are, there is nothing that's going to move you. You are certain of your position in life. And I think that's the real goal here. So the next time you hear that phrase, maybe you're amongst friends and they're talking about somebody else, just keep in mind that it is an extremely outdated phrase. It is a term used to attack women. It is a term used to attack older women. And do you want to be part of that conversation? If you hear a friend or loved one using this phrase, you can chime back and say, you know what, I don't know, I think she's got, she's dressing how she wants. She doesn't give a hoot. I kind of aspire to be like her. When I see women dressing in a way that I know they're doing things differently, they're doing things just for themselves, I say to myself, I want to be that person. I want to be that person who dresses for themselves. I think it's wonderful and I think it should be celebrated. We'll leave it there for today's episode. If you're interested in working with me, go ahead and book a clarity call. My website, sararhinoofficial.com. You can also join my lovely community of women who are reclaiming their identity, reclaiming their style in the Identity and Style House. I'll leave all the links you need down below. Let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments. Please rate the podcast if you haven't. A 5-star review would be very welcome. And I'll see you again next time for another episode. Take care.